Now joining me, Sports Illustrated writer on the MLB as well as MLB Network and WFAN personality, Jon Heyman. Jon, Zach Gelb, PureShilvio.com. Thank you for joining me. How are you doing this evening?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm doing great myself. What's your reaction to the whole debacle that happened with Torrey Posada on Saturday night?
Well, I think a lot of things about that. Obviously, Posada was wrong, and he admitted that he was wrong, and it's unfortunate it dragged on, and Jeter somehow got dragged into it, being his friend and the captain, and he tried to take a middle ground, I think, but for the Yankees' taste, it was a little bit too much toward his friend and not enough of being a captain, I guess. They weren't too pleased. And, I think Jeter, from what I understand, didn't really have the whole story. He had ridden with Posada to the game the next day, and my understanding was Posada just told him that he had told Joe Girardi that he needed a breather, needed to take a day off, and really didn't tell him that he had declined to play. It might seem funny that he didn't have the whole story, but I think that's what it was, and he came out and said that Posada did nothing wrong. And to the Yankees brass, that was something wrong. They wanted to hear Jeter say, at least like Posada said, that he had done something wrong. So it dragged on a day past where it probably should have, and perhaps it'll be over now. But I think the backstory is that Girardi and Posada don't have a very close relationship. There isn't a lot of trust there. There isn't a lot of like there, particularly on Posada's part toward Girardi, and this goes back to their playing days. And, something could crop up again, particularly if Posada continues to struggle at bat.
Now, in 1981, George Steinbrenner was the owner of this team, and he would fire guys left and right for just looking at you the wrong way, looking at him the wrong way. And then in 2005, he kind of took a step back, and he became more mellower because of health concerns. If this was to happen in 1981, what would happen to Posada? And if this was to happen in 2005, what would George Steinbrenner do to Jorge Posada?
Well, I'm sure he'd have a choice word or two to say. When he did his firing, normally it was managers or coaches, people that were more dispensable than somebody making $13 million. It's hard for me to recall him just releasing a player making that kind of money. Of course, players didn't make quite that much money, particularly in the 80s, certainly not. But they were making pretty good money, but he still would always come out with a choice word or two, not afraid to speak his mind, always grab headlines that way. So I'm sure he would have had plenty to say in the 80s, he got a little mellower in his older age and maybe a little bit more nostalgic and a little more sympathetic, and probably wouldn't have been as candid as he was back in the 80s.
Now, El Capitan, Derek Jeter, 253 average, 2 home runs, and 12 RBIs. When do you see Girardi start to bump Derek Jeter down the lineup?
Well, this might have been a cautionary tale. I don't know if he wants to go through this again with a much even higher profile player than Posada. I mean, Jimmy Jeter is a sure Hall of Famer. Posada, probably a borderline Hall of Famer. And Jeter, clearly an icon, and he isn't batting 165. I know there's been a lot of speculation that he'd be moved down the order, but I don't see that happening in the near future, and part of that is because Jeter is such an icon, and it would create such disturbance, but the other part is that Gardner really isn't hitting great at this point. I don't think he's hitting any better than Jeter. I think you'd have to have an alternative who is hitting significantly better than Jeter. It might happen at some point, and if it does, it'll be a big deal. But I just don't see that happening anytime in the next couple of weeks, at least.
We're talking to Sports Illustrated's Jon Heyman, and Jon, I would imagine Rafael Soriano doesn't have too many friends in the Yankees clubhouse these days.
Well, it certainly has been an interesting beginning to Soriano's Yankee career. I don't know if it was a language situation or really not understanding what he was supposed to say, but for him to come out and answer a question about his struggles by saying, well, the hitters are really the ones struggling, that's not something you can really say. I know they've lockered him next to Mariano Rivera. I think they were hopeful that some of Rivera's ways would rub off on him, but so far that doesn't appear to be the case. He had trouble in Tampa that was hidden, I think. The reputation behind the scenes, at least, and the feeling of Joe Madden, the manager in Tampa, was that Soriano really wasn't the most cooperative closer, that he wouldn't like to come in innings other than the ninth, that he didn't like to come in situations other than closing. And with the Yankees, he's in the eighth inning only, and in non-closing situations for the most part. And I think people thought this might be an adjustment, and so far it looks like an adjustment. Now, he's on the DL with an elbow situation, they say, but he has not thrown well, and he really hasn't blended in very well either to this point.
Now, at the corner positions for the New York Yankees in the outfield, Brett Gardner and Nick Swisher haven't been great, and then the starting rotation 3 through 5 hasn't been phenomenal either. Come the trade deadline in October, do you see the Yankees for the immediate issue go out to get an outfielder or a starting pitcher?
That's interesting because I think everybody felt going in that the starting pitching was going to be the weakness of this team. We have a few weeks to go before we start seriously looking at who they're going to be trading, because nobody really is available at this point. Teams are not giving up. It's really too early for that. But I would say at this moment, the outfield could be a consideration as well as a starting pitcher. I do believe that the Yankees will look to get a starting pitcher ultimately by the deadline. I think they would like to strengthen it. I think they'd like it to become a plus, not a minus. And right now, it's getting by. They're doing okay. Garcia's done a good job. Colon's done a good job. But I think ultimately they're going to need a starting pitcher for sure. And I think they may try to add a hitter. One thing about the Yankees is they don't have to pick and choose. They can probably go for 2 people because they can afford that.
Now, in the AL East, it's very competitive. The Yankees dropped 6 in a row before picking up a win last night. Should Yankee fans be concerned about what they're seeing on the field right now?
I think so because, there's definitely some questions. The rotation, I think, is a question ultimately, although it's done okay. The hitting has been inconsistent, while the runs scored totals are decent overall. A lot of that comes from April. The last few weeks, they've really had guys slumping up and down that lineup. Teixeira has not hit great. Cano has been getting back to when he was everything. A-Rod, until 2-home run game recently, has not been swinging well at all. Jeter obviously has been an issue. And Posada and Gardner and Swisher. So basically, almost everybody except for Granderson and Martin is underperforming from them. Granderson's been spectacular, but he's not going to be the guy to carry a team. They're going to need better hitting, and there's definitely reason to worry between the offense, the inconsistencies, and the pitching age, and there's a lot of reason to worry about the Yankees right now.
We're talking to Sports Illustrated writer Jon Heyman. And John, the Mets and the Yankees, they have the complete antithesis of each other's problems as the New York Yankees and the Mets square off in the Subway Series this weekend. What's the financial update with the New York Mets? How close are they to getting a minority owner?
Well, I think I'm hearing that they're pretty close on settling on somebody, and then, of course, after that is the case, they'll have to run past the commissioner's office, and it'll have to be approved. I think that they've had more interest than people would have thought for a non-controlling interest in the team. They may give up some control. There might be some issues where the new minority owner will have some power. I think that the Wilpons, for now, will retain the majority of the control and power, but I think they're working with a few different possibilities right now and really getting close to settling on somebody, from what I understand. But they've had more interest than people suspected they might, in a team that's struggling to join an ownership group that is also struggling financially.
What's the difference here that's going on in L.A. and the New York Mets? Because Bud Selig came in here and he took over control of all financial operations for the Dodgers. Why hasn't he done so for the Mets after the mess they got entangled with in Madoff?
Well, the Mets also have financial troubles, but I think that's basically where the similarities end. The Mets, at least in what we know so far and what the commissioner believes, unless there's some evidence that's presented that's contrary, the Mets innocently made a very bad investment. Now, unfortunately, that investment lasted for decades, and they gave money to the wrong person and lost a significant amount of money. That's different than the ownership group in Los Angeles, the McCourts, who borrowed money out of the team and spent on their lavish lifestyle. I think that is looked upon very negatively by the commissioner, as it should be. He basically used the team as a personal piggy bank and is now in debt because he used up all the team money and is not able to pay the players. He's got Mr. McCourt, who's still the owner for now anyway, has got some scheme to make a deal with Fox and take money out of that to pay back his old debts and pay the players. But that's not the way to run the operation. I mean, you want money now to pay the debts now. You don't want to borrow money from the future to pay your old debts. That's not the right way to do business. And it was just a very ugly, messy divorce with a lot of embarrassing things. To me, that's different than the Wilpons who just invested unwisely and really to their misfortune.
Over the last 4 years, the Mets have been handled with a bunch of unfavorable fortune here. A plethora of injuries have occurred, 4 already this season. Isn't it just mind-boggling? Have you ever seen anything like this with the team just get so many injuries one after another?
Well, now you're testing my memory. There have been teams that have been struck by injuries. I know the Reds were hit very hard for a while. It may not be as memorable to New Yorkers, but maybe not in the last couple of years, but there was a 4 or 5 year period where they were the hardest hit team, I think. And I think the Mets, fair to say, they're the hardest hit over the last 3 years or so, and it is unfortunate. It's not necessarily to players that are aging that rapidly either. It's, Carlos Beltran, who's in his early 30s, had that unfortunate knee situation. We had Santana with the shoulder. Bay with the very unfortunate concussion, and then he had another issue this year with the rib cage area. It basically has struck everybody. Now we have Davis on the DL, and the prospects. Fernando Martinez has been hurt constantly.
Mejia?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically up and down. And I'm trying to think of some Pagan. I'm trying to think of somebody who really hasn't been affected by it, and it's hard to think of anybody who really hasn't been. I guess maybe some of their catchers. I don't know. Pelfrey, I guess, has been healthy, but K-Rod, I guess, we had some other difficulty. But it's hard to name the guys that haven't been affected. It's unfortunate. I think most of it is coincidental until proven otherwise. I think there were some cases in which they seemed to downplay or underplay somebody's injury, and maybe they didn't realize how hurt they were, and maybe that made things linger in some cases. But I think by and large, for the most part, the problem is that they've really suffered from misfortune.
Staying here on the injury front, what's the update on the kosher crusher, Ike Davis? When's the earliest that we could see him back?
Ike Davis, I think it's to be determined at this point. They haven't been all that. They've said that he's got an ankle injury and a bone bruise. I don't think they, other than putting him on the DL, so we know it's at least 2 weeks. They've said specifically, I think they're reticent at this point to really pinpoint exact dates for return because they've missed so badly on their predictions in the past. So I understand that, but an ankle injury can be difficult too. It can take 2 weeks, it could take 4 weeks, it could take more. It was interesting. He stayed in the game for that half inning before Terry Collins pulled him out, but it looked like a painful injury at the time. Not that pain is necessarily have a big correlation to how long somebody's out, but it can. I would say that it should be just weeks, not months, for this injury as far as what we know, but you never know with the Mets.
We're talking to Sports Illustrated writer Jon Heyman. And John, 2 more questions right before we let you go. 2 Hall of Fame questions, that is.